The transfer portal is open and it is hot, and there are a lot of dogs that have decided they're going to enter that and explore their options. That's not what this is about. This is about who Kirby and the Dawg should be exploring their options with in the portal. Who should they be going after? I think there are a lot of talented guys out there in the portal, and when you look at the rankings, and I've got on threes actually, I have on threes recruiting transfer portal rankings, right? Kind of their conglomeration of that, and they've got a lot of really talented players there towards the top of the list. A lot of them being quarterbacks. I don't think Georgia's going to be going after a quarterback in the transfer portal. Signs are pointing to a Carson Beck return for 2024. As I'm recording this video on Thursday at 8 p.m., there hasn't been an official word on whether or not Carson Beck is going to be leaving. And note that there hasn't been an official word on most of the things I'm saying at this point. This is going out Friday morning. I think there are a few guys that Georgia should be going after, and let's talk about that. Ryan Crowley from Dawg Post here, talking about the transfer portal and the Dogs. Where do they need help in 2024? What could Georgia have used in 2023? Who is Georgia losing from this 2023 squad, right? So maybe we should be pulling up a depth chart as well, and I'm sure you guys love that typing noise, because what I've been looking at is just who they should be going after and what we know. I think there are a couple running backs. I think there is a defensive lineman. I think there are a couple wide receivers, right? I think those are a few of the places that they should be looking. Offensive line, maybe not as much. And here's the thing. This upcoming class for the Georgia Bulldogs, this 2024 recruiting class, is pretty heavy in the trenches as far as offensive line and defensive line. They've got plenty of guys at those positions in this class. They've got a couple running backs in this class. They've gone after a couple. It's not like they're not going after these positions and they're not securing that through recruiting that I'm talking about. I just think there's some impact guys that are already out there that they could bring in and make a difference on this team. Maybe they could have made a difference on this team this year. When I look at when I look at this list, this depth chart, and I see, is Nazir Stackhouse going to go or leave? Right? Who's the number one player Georgia should be going after? It's Walter Nolan, Texas A&M defensive tackle. He's leaving the transfer portal. He's from the class of 22, was the top player, depending on who you ask. He was one of the top players. He's an impact player, 4 sacks this year, a sack his freshman year, I think around 30-something tackles in his sophomore season. Walter Nolan is considered by many to be the best player available in the transfer portal, and Georgia was in his top 3. Georgia was in the mix for him coming out of high school, and I think that he is a guy that they desperately could use, because unless a game changer just appears, sprouts out of nowhere, or develops just a true game changer on the defensive line, they lacked that this season. Maybe Walter Nolan can be that. Maybe he can't. I think he'd add it. I do think players get better over time, and Georgia's players will get better, but they're going to be losing people, and people that have been playing a lot of significant snaps might not be coming back, whether it be transfer portal or draft for the Georgia Bulldogs. So I believe that Walter Nolan, especially with Barry Alexander's departure last offseason, I believe that Walter Nolan is one of the guys that Georgia needs to be going after, especially since there is a prior conversation there. There's a prior dialogue there between he and the coaches. It's not like they're recruiting him from scratch. There is a relationship there. Moving on. Let's talk about the 2 backs that I like. And I like Raheem Sanders, and I like Trevor Etienne. These are SEC running backs, successful SEC running backs. Georgia had issues at running back this year, and I'm not saying Kendall Milton and Dejan Edwards aren't good, and they're no slouch. Kendall Milton, I think they're both NFL draft picks at the running back position, and they both have contributed as much as they could over these 4 years. They both have had 4 years in the program. Edwards kind of acting as the closing running back in 2022, and he was the main back for a good portion of 2023. Kendall Milton had the high ceiling, and a healthy Kendall Milton looked like a really legit, like an NFL running back. Looked like a guy that can make it in the pros. Looked like a guy that can, get out on the field in the pros. He certainly was enough to bruise some SEC defenses this year, right? But those guys are probably going to be gone. And even if they weren't, Branson Robinson's returning, and there's Roderick Robinson's returning. There are a couple of running backs in this 24 class that Georgia is going to get that I think have a lot of potential. Dean and Matt. I've yet to watch Dwight Phillips Jr. But Dean and Matt really have beat the drum on they think that he could be an impact player for the Georgia Bulldogs one day, whether that be day 1 or day 3 or year 3. Right? They think that Dwight Phillips Jr. can make an impact for the Georgia Bulldogs with his speed. From the highlights I've watched of Nate Frazier, he's out in California, so it's not as easy for me to go see him if I even wanted to. From the highlights I've seen, Nate Frazier's really good. So they have good young talent, but Raheem Sanders, he's really, really good, and he's dealt with some injuries this year. But you put him or Trevor Etienne, Travis Etienne's little brother, he's got those genes. He's got those NFL genes and those one of the best ACC running back genes in Travis Etienne, right? Trevor's really good, and he split time in that Florida backfield. And look, for both of them and for almost everybody in the transfer portal, if you go into Georgia, you go into a better situation. So I think that both of those running backs can make an impact because guess what? The real reason they should be going after that is you don't know when someone's going to get hurt. And they had an issue with that earlier in the season when Edwards couldn't go and Milton couldn't go and Branson Robinson couldn't go. Look, Cash Jones and Roger Robertson are good, but they're not the starting running backs, especially with the lack of experience they have, on a real championship contending team. No hate. They just aren't as good as those other guys. Maybe Roger Robinson can develop into that. I know he was a higher touted prospect. Cash Jones made an impact. And look, Cash Jones is fast, man. Cash Jones made an impact. But those guys aren't Kendall Milton and Dejan Edwards. And Trevor Etienne and Raheem Sanders are just as good, if not better than those guys. So those are the types of players you want to bring into your offense because it takes the load off of others. When I look at Georgia's depth chart and I look at wide receiver at this point, what we know about Georgia's wide receiver room as far as departures is Jackson Meeks and Mekhi Muse. Well, guess what? They were not on the field that much. Mekhi Muse, obviously he was a fan favorite this year, made some impact plays, more specifically in the special teams game. I think he had 13 catches on the season, including a 50-something yard screen pass that he took to the house earlier on. I believe that was against Ball State. It was in week 2 or 3, something like that. Those two guys are the only ones that are leaving so far. Is Marcus Rosemary-Jackson going to the draft? Is anyone else transferring? Is Ladd McConkey going to the draft? Right? We don't know that yet. Last year, Georgia showed they were not afraid to go out there and get some impact guys in the transfer portal at receiver with Dominic Lovett from Missouri and Ra Thomas from Mississippi State. Well, Dominic Lovett actually ended up being the second leading receiver on Georgia, over 500 yards. He only trailed Brock Bowers in receiving stats. Part of that was because of Ladd McConkey's injury. He was the wide receiver 1 on this football team with A.D. Mitchell's transfer out. But look, Georgia, it's not like they just leaned on Marcus Rosemary-Jackson saying, oh, you're going to be our true X receiver. Now that we don't have Ladd, you're going to be our true receiver on the outside or this or that, or you're going to be our true receiver on the inside. Brock Bowers is obviously that weapon. If Brock Bowers comes back to Georgia, I'd be shocked, right? The dude's going to be a top 10 or 15 pick. I believe he's gone. Even though there hasn't been a formal announcement of that yet, that's why I'm making that comment. I believe he's gone, and he was also one of the leading pass catchers. Will Shepard is one of those guys, a 6'3 guy that made plays against Georgia, that made plays against a lot of other SEC teams. He was number 14 on Vanderbilt. I don't know if you remember him, but when I looked at, okay, well, what if they go out there and get a wide receiver? His name pops up, and I like him a lot as a potential, just for Georgia, a big receiver that can go out there and make plays. And I'm seeing on three's metrics, 19.5% predicting to I don't know what that means. A 19.5% chance he's going to Tulane, a 17.1% chance he's going to Mississippi State. I also, you want a side note? Quick tangent. On3 also has like the NIL valuations, those are just guesses. And also, who is anyone to say what these people are worth, right? They're worth what people are willing to give them money. As far as NIL, what is your value in this? How much a company is willing to pay you. That's kind of what it is with that. So that's what I want to say about someone's NIL value. Their value is what people make it. And that's just kind of how it is, right? I mean, if Gatorade wants to give Caleb Williams $50 million, then he's worth $50 million. But if Gatorade doesn't think that, then he's not. And that's kind of how the world works with that. I think that Will Shepard is a legit receiver. Juice Wells is in the transfer portal. Colin Lacey, the South Alabama kid, I know I've read some stuff about him and how he's a legit guy. There's plenty of really good. I'm going down this list. Obviously, you're not looking at it, but look up the On3 list or whatever list you want. Just Google best transfers out there, and you know which ones would make sense for Georgia and which ones wouldn't possibly. And when I think about receiver and I think about the types of receiver Georgia needed, you needed a legit guy on the outside. Ra Thomas was injured. They didn't go to Marcus Rosemy-Jackson in that manner, and part of that is because of Brock Bowers and Lat McConkey. But when those guys aren't out there, what is it? And Dylan Bell is going to be an impact guy next year. If Marcus Rosemy-Jackson stays for a fifth year, he's going to be an impact guy next year. Oscar Delp is going to command some looks. I believe Lawson Lucky might command some looks. Dominic Lovett and Ra Thomas, if they stay, they're going to be really high on this depth chart. But when you go out and get true weapons, like Raheem Sanders or Trevor Etienne or a Will Shepard, it makes a difference on offense. And it will make a difference for what will likely be a fifth-year player. Obviously, it's second year legitimately playing, but a fifth-year college student in Carson Beck has been around and understands it and now has had a year as a starter, and you would expect him to take a step forward in his game and as a quarterback, getting some more games logged in. That helps him with those weapons. At the end of the day, I think the number one player Georgia should be going after is Walter Nolan. It's a no-brainer. It's not like I said anything that nobody is thinking. He is one of the best, if not the best, available player in this transfer portal, and he happens to fit a position of need, in my opinion, for the Georgia Bulldogs. What do you think about this?